Good evening, friends, brothers, and sisters, on this wonderful Monday morning, the 21st day of June 2021, specifically the 21st day of Pride Month. And as we usher Pride Month out, we talk about issues and topics that are specific to Pride Month. And today is no different. Today we are talking about transgender. I am who I am. And we have two of my friends, two guests who are going to be talking to us about what it means to be transgender and what it is. Because I think a lot of us are just talking from a place of unknowing or of knowledge. And that is why sometimes we become so aggressive and we get it wrong a lot of the time. So today I am having my co-host, the wonderful, handsome Mr. Beanie himself, Kim Jim Kwamkwi. Welcome, Kim Janput. Before we introduce our guest, let us, as it is the norm, call your friends, call your parents, call your children, call your neighbors, call your fundis, call your pastor, call everybody so that we can all be a part of this conversation so that tomorrow we don't perish because we lack knowledge. So friends, let us please bow our heads wherever we are and pray. On this wonderful Monday, Lord, you did it again, you did it again. You woke us up, Lord, when all we had was hope. You woke us up, Lord, when all we had were dreams. You woke us up because of your grace. And for that, we give nothing but all the glory and honor to you. Lord, this morning we are talking about izinto zezulu, things that are contained in the Bible, things that are happening every day in the world. But because we do not know the right things and the wrong things, we find ourselves on the wrong side of transgender topics. Lord, today we are going to talk about the T in the LGBTIQA++ community. Heavenly Father, please give us the knowledge, give us the love, give us the patience to understand, not just to respond, but to hear, to listen, and to understand. But more than anything, Lord, give us the love that surpasses everything, the love and the peace that surpasses all understanding. Heavenly Father, I bring Grayson Teller, your son, to your throne, to your throne, Lord, as he is coming to talk to us about his journey. And I bring your daughter, Lord, Kanyisilia Phillips, to your throne of grace, Lord, as she is going to talk to us about her journey as well. We love them, Lord. We please cover them as they engage us in things that we don't understand so that we may gain knowledge. And I pray this. And I bring Kim, Lord, my co-host, your son, as he is going to be co-hosting this conversation with us. Heavenly Father, cover this platform, continue to make it a platform of hope, a platform of education, and a platform of empowerment. We pray this in the name above all names, the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Friends, this evening we have two awesome people who are going to be teaching us and engaging us in the conversation of transgender. And I love the topic that they both came with, and it says transgender, I am who I am. Let us welcome Grayson Vanguard Taylor. I didn't know that your name was Vanguard. I was like, okay, the name Vanguard. Anyway. It says, my name is Grayson Vanguard Teller, with my pronouns being he or him. I affirm myself as a Black heterosexual transgender man. I was born in Kimberley in the Northern Cape on the 11th of April, 1990. Subsequently matriculated at an all-girls school, Kimberley Girls High. I am a human rights defender in general. However, a trans and gender diverse defender in particular. As Black trans man, my journey with the system and current status quo of my environment has created a hunger in the pursuit for justice, not only for myself, but for those who cannot advocate for themselves. My vigor was shaped by my upbringing through culture, tradition, and of course, religion. I wanted to take up many professions growing up, ranging from being a doctor to being in the army, and from the army to being a lawyer. In all these career choices I had as a 10-year-old had to do was with the protection and the defending those that cannot do so for themselves. Years later, I found myself advocating for the emancipation of the LGBTIQ persons and attempting to uproot the culture, tradition, and patriarchy embedded in society that leads to many social ills among the LGBTIQ persons and their families. With an academic background in political science and African studies, coupled with firm vested interest in gender equity, I was called to serve my fellow compatriots at the University of the Free State in the Gender and Sexual Equity Office. I have never looked back since. As an activist, one constantly goes through a period where you need to learn and unlearn, which quite often requires silence and open mind, reconciliation, and knowledge. As a person, as a people, we cannot connect the dots moving back. However, we do so by not being stagnant, but by moving. I would like to take this journey with you. Welcome, Grayson. How are you doing?
I can't complain, ma'am. How about you?
I am very well. I'm very well. Thank you. I am so happy to be having this conversation with you. And thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this conversation. Also during Pride Month, which makes it so specific and so wonderful to have. Let me now bring Khanyi Let me bring Khanyi to the platform. Khanyisile is the current community engagement coordinator of GDX. She was born and raised in Cape Town. She holds a bachelor's degree in history and linguistics from UWC and a postgraduate certificate in education from UWC. Currently registering at Cornerstone Institute for an honors degree in community development management. Her passion for community work started as a teenager. She volunteered for organizations such as Scripture Union and Safe Cities for several years, and this has led her to pursue a career in teaching, where she taught both on primary and high school levels in disadvantaged communities. By joining GDX, she hopes to increase awareness and visibilization of the trans and gender diverse communities' rights and needs. She also is the director of Transition, an NPO focused on providing direct support to transgender persons who has been disowned by their families on account of their gender identity and gender expression. Khanyi, welcome, Sisi. How are you doing?
Hey, I am good. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. I'm not sure if it's technical difficulties or network issues. I think maybe the two goes hand in hand, but I'm happy to be here. I hope you can see my face.
Yes, now we can. Welcome. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to tell us who is Khanyisile Phillips. You've already said that you come from Cape Town, born and bred, but if someone does not know you, who is Khanyi?
Well, Khanyisile Phillips is a transgender woman from Cape Town, but I would like to include in that a transgender woman of color. We understand that in a lot of cases that our issues and our challenges are not the same. So being a transgender woman of
Oh, your connection is acting up. I think maybe while we give her time or her connection time to recover, Grayson, tell us about yourself. Who is Grayson? Tell us.
Sure. That question, eh? Wow. I'm an activist. I'm a human rights defender. I'm a transgender man. I am the youngest of two boys at home. And in my spare time, if I'm not doing stuff in the office or doing work within civil society, I am playing chess, reading books, and I have a black belt in karate as well. So that is who I am in a nutshell. And yeah, short and sweet.
Yeah, thank you. Kanya, I can see your back. Your connection was acting up there for a little bit.
So can I continue? I'm so sorry. I do think that my network usually acts up around about this time of the day because there's too many people on the network as people are back from work now. So as I was explaining that I am a transgender woman of color and
oh, there it goes again. Okay, let's give her time again. Grayson, coming back to you. So when did you realize that you were transgender? And maybe as a disclaimer to the two of you and to everybody within the LGBTIQA community, if I use a word that is offensive, please correct me, because sometimes it's very difficult for us to know which words are offensive and which ones are not. And I hope that we cover that within our conversation. So when did you realize that you were transgender? And what does that mean?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think I've always known that growing up, I was different, you know, as compared to my friends and my classmates and all of that, because I had a particular attraction to women. And I just didn't understand at that particular point in time what it meant. But I knew that I wasn't like my friends, you know. So that was the first distinction that I had within myself. And growing up, you know, I always knew that the word that they tell me I am is this word lesbian. And I think that's one of the flaws that we have within societies, that we don't have languaging, appropriate languaging that we teach people and children at a very young age. So as I navigated my teenage years, I affirmed myself as a lesbian woman. Up until I got to varsity and I realized that, whoa, there's this word that rightfully describes who I am, and which is the incongruency between sex assigned and birth and who I affirm myself as currently. And that's that's when I reckoned with the word and said, this is who I am, because it describes who I am. And I think what's also very important about debunking the state of society right now is that within our African cultures, right, in our African languages specifically, is that there isn't a single word in Xhosa, in Zulu, in Sotho that will politically correctly define the word lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex. You won't find it in any African language that we speak in South Africa, right? And that's one of the injustices that we have as a people within our own identities. So now we are then taught from a colonistic point of view who we are, which is incorrect. But nonetheless, I found myself identifying myself as a transgender man in varsity. And from there, that's when I started affirming myself as a man.
Yeah. And how was that for your family? And maybe let me just also give you maybe a little story of where this question is coming from. When I got married, and when people get married, literally on that day, you change your surname. And in certain cultures, they even give you a new name. So almost immediately, your family calls you by your new name. They accept that you are now this, whoever the new name is, and you are now Mrs. Arendse. And from day one, they call you Mrs. Arendse.
Yeah.
But in the transgender community, I find that families are finding it difficult to do that. So maybe you were born, I'm not sure what your name was when you were born, and then now you are Grayson. How did your family accept your new name and your new gender, as it were?
Yeah. I think before I answer that, I think I should just give a brief introduction as to why we find ourselves as we were, as we are right now in society. Look, when you are born, Sly, and you are born, you know, the doctor or the midwife catches you and they're looking between the legs and they see a little penis, they say, ah, it's a boy. Or they look in between your legs and they see a vagina and say, ah, it's a girl, right? And off they go. The parents then name the boy, in a masculine name, because that's what society expects of you. That if you're born with sex assigned at birth being male, you must be masculine. And if sex assigned at birth is female, you must be feminine, isn't it? But the interesting conversation that as a society we don't have is the fact that we never unpack intersex babies that are born, right? Because in society we have the national registry that's men and male and female. But what happens to babies who are intersex, who are born with both external genitalia, right? Which then speaks to forced genital mutilation that happens in society, right? But nonetheless, you find yourself that now your parents and your family now see this girl, and now this girl needs to act a particular way and affirm who they are. And of course, there's that huge contestation between your mother and the child, right? Because the mother expects a certain behavior, expects you to conform to what is deemed natural or normal. So that contestation between the house then becomes bigger. And, depending on how your family is, they can either affirm your identity or, call the pastor to the living room the following day. And that's exactly what happened in my story. That when I, interestingly enough, came out as a lesbian, there was a pastor in my house, praying the gay away. My mother was not impressed because, of course, she didn't understand what is this thing that my child is saying, and that's where the continuous conversation, arguments, slamming of doors, started within my specific home. But I can tell you that, affirming myself, I've never slept better since doing that.
Yeah. Sure. Kanye, probably the same question for you. Are you from Cape Town? I mean, I'm from Pretoria, and I see the totally different world in Cape Town, where, the LGBTIQA plus community here is so open, so accepted. And I just love it. I love the space. But in terms of your journey, how was your journey like? And how did your family take it?
Thank you, Salelo, for the opportunity. Again, I just want to apologize for my poor connection, everyone. I know that this is obviously impacting the event. So my journey was not as easy as most people would think it was. I think with regards to being a transgender woman now, this wasn't always the case for me. In terms of coming out, I had to come out with what I knew at the time. And the identity I chose to go with was a gay boy, a gay man growing up. And so for me, I didn't have to tell family or my parents, because both my parents passed away when I was young. And so
okay, you're back.
I'm back. So both my parents passed away when I was still young. And so for me, growing into a young adult, it was easy to kind of come out and let people know that this is who I am. But you must understand that I come from a very kind of religious background where my mom was, always sent us to church. She made sure that we live in a certain way, and that the sex that is assigned or was assigned at birth, that is who we are, as we know that gender is a
your connection. Kanye, I think we can allow you to switch off your video. That might actually help with your sound. Do you want to maybe try again without the video on?
Hi, Sealelo. I am here.
Okay.
I'm here. Okay, so like I said, gender is a social construction, and obviously when it comes to your sex assigned at birth, your family basically gives you responsibilities and they decide how you should be living your life. And so with my father passing away at a young age, your mom having to have a conversation with you as the adult, as the oldest boy in the family, you automatically are supposed to be taking over. I don't know if this is true for all cultures, but when it comes to my upbringing, I know that if you're the eldest boy in the family, you're supposed to take over the family in terms of a father-like role. This goes into you providing for the family. It goes into you protecting your sisters. All those responsibilities that is your father's or was your father's responsibility. In the absence of a father, that was automatically shifted to the eldest boy in the family. And so this was very true for me. I grew up in a way that I knew I was not, a boy. I was not a boy from a very young age. I knew I was, and you might think that people always say I was born in the wrong body, and that is so, it's such a cliche, but it's actually the truth. I mean, growing up, I didn't have any friends. I didn't, mingle with people because my mom never allowed us to play with other kids. And so growing up, I only had me and my sister. And my sister was 2 years younger than me. And so we were each other's friends. However, I always seemed to navigate towards wanting to play with her dolls, then wanting to play with my cars, and even in that way, my father was very strict in terms of who is his favorite. And so he made it known that the girl, my sister, by the way, myself and my sister have a great relationship. But he made it known that she's the favorite and that he will protect her. But I also know that they knew that I was not a typical boy. And so later in life, so I'm going back and forth between my childhood and my later years. I asked my mom a question. This was years after my father passed away. And I asked her a question regarding an article I read. I read an article on my way to school. I was walking and I found this article in a newspaper and I was reading. And the article said that sometimes if parents wants a certain gender, most of the times gender means a lot to many people. And if they so badly want a certain, let's say they want a boy or they want a girl, for example, and they wholeheartedly believe. Now you must understand that this is in the 80s. Ultrasounds and scans were not really available back then, especially for Black people and people of color. And so they would hope until the end that this is what they would want, they wanted a girl. So I asked my mom, is this true that what kind of baby did you want for your child, your first child with my father? And she said, actually, he wanted a girl. And so she went with wanting a girl, and obviously I was the product of that want, of that, yearning to have a girl for his first child, for my father's first child. And so I kind of navigated through this system where
can you? Okay, maybe let us give you a few moments. Grayson, how you said early on that you started transitioning, if that's the right word, in varsity. Already by then you have a life, you have the community that knows you as a girl, and you have friends who know you as a girl. How did the community deal with your transitioning and with your journey? Did you find that it was confusing, or they just ostracized you, or were they like, oh no, you're still the same person? So how was it?
So when as a transgender person, when you undergo a journey of affirming yourself, it's normally in two different parts. The first would be socially affirming yourself. Then the second part would be affirming who you are medically, right? And at that particular point in time, I started affirming myself socially, using male pronouns, et cetera, and introducing myself to the world and my family. And then later on, because unfortunately medical aids do not cover for gender affirming healthcare, as they see it as cosmetic and elective, right? And I think it's a very colonial and very racist system, because it speaks to the Immorality Act of 1927, which said that LGBTI people basically could not be who they are. And of course, legacies of that particular past still persist today. So therefore, when accessing gender affirming healthcare, you need to pay for it out of your own pocket, and it's not necessarily affordable. So of course, later on, I found myself affirming my gender medically. So of course, I'm reintroducing myself to the world. It shouldn't be that way, but of course, unfortunately, it's that way. So I was very privileged that, it's been, less than a handful of people who I know who have ostracized me and discriminated against me. And with my immediate family, of course, it was a journey of learning and unlearning up until we got to a point where we were on the same page in understanding identity, in understanding who you are. And that's how I started affirming myself. And unfortunately, not everyone is privileged to do so. Right now, currently, the waiting list at the Groote Schuur Hospital, which is based here in Cape Town, is 25 years long. So effectively, that means that many trans and gender diverse persons would live and die without affirming who they are, which then subsequently speaks to them being constantly misgendered, people constantly using the wrong pronoun, constantly ostracized when you use the bathroom. And that's the unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in society, that there's the haves and the haves not, which speaks to identity and affirmation within society.
I am so glad that you're already touching on the medical aid part of it, because one of my questions was going to be, how much does it cost to even, because I know that someone has to take hormones, it's a long journey. Maybe between you and if you can explain to us how long it takes. Maybe also talking to a young girl and a young boy who really believes and knows that they are in the wrong body and they would want to transition. And they just need to know, to wrap their head around it. It's quite sad that you say it is seen as cosmetic, because there are certain things you ask yourself, who would choose? The journey is so long, it is so daunting, it is so cold. Who would choose a journey like that? And for the system, maybe this is the time where we actually change the system to say, this is not a choice. People feel that they are really born in the wrong body. And therefore they need to go through that. 25 years, it used to be 20 years. So now the waiting period is 25 years. So if you're a 25-year-old and you are transitioning, you might not even get there. So for the rest, or for most of your productive years, you're going to be living in a body that is not fully yours.
Absolutely, indeed. And it's a sad reality, that's what society has come to. And I think what's very important, because normally when people have the LGBTI conversation, it normally speaks to biblical references or the incorrect interpretation of biblical references, and it speaks to a whole list of things. And I always liken the conversation with identity to the conversation that we're having during the apartheid era. Because as Black people or people who are not white, people died for defending their identities. Could you imagine, sitting across from a white policeman and defending your Blackness and saying, listen, this is who I am, and my identity matters on this earth. In the very same way, the world and South Africa responded to that diversity, the world should respond in the very same manner to a difference in sexual orientation and gender identity, as it refers to legacies of the past. You know, as I referred to earlier on the Immorality Act of 1927, the Immorality Act of 1925, you know, which spoke to one's gender identity. But however, Sly, we are making progress as a nation. Recently, as civil society, we've been campaigning and lobbying and advocating for the inclusion of trans identity within the system holistically. You know, from the time when you are given an ID to the time that you die. So subsequently, the Home Affairs has introduced the identification policy, which then speaks to trans and gender diverse persons and speaks to intersex people to affirm who they are in their own identity. So in the near future, you'll have male, female, and unspecified that speaks to people with a difference in gender identity. So we are making progress.
I love that. Kanye, are you back with us?
I am.
Okay, awesome. I want to come to you now. You said in your submission that your mother made sure that you guys went to church. How has the church dealt with your journey specifically?
So with regards to my journey, I actually had to leave the church in order for me to be who I am today. I was, like Grayson said earlier on, that there's different aspects to transitioning, right? So you get your social transitioning, your medical transitioning, your surgical, transitioning and affirmation. And so with all of those, I think every person who identifies as a transgender person can't do all of those at once, right? It's almost practically impossible to do everything at once. It's stages that we go through. And so when it comes to the church, I felt that because we are preaching against it, because the church, they haven't necessarily had the opportunity to treat me in a certain way or to exclude me to that extent, I automatically knew if I'm going to live my life totally opposite. Now, you must understand that our church was very integrated in terms of we were like a family. And so being like a family and growing up in the church and, being in leadership in the church even, you coming out and saying, listen, I don't identify with my sex assigned at birth, and this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to live as. Automatically you're going to be seen, as Grayson referred to, immoral. You're going to be seen as someone who's not able to serve the church. And so I made a conscious decision to leave the church as a whole and even leave religion as a whole.
Okay, your network is acting up again. Grayson, but maybe just to bring people up to speed with you actually work, or Kanye, are you back?
I am back. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay.
So as I explained to you, Selaelo, that I had to leave the church, but I also socially transitioned before I medically transitioned. This obviously gave me an opportunity, leaving the church, starting my studies, and at university, like Grayson said, that they started transitioning at university. I felt more at ease, more at peace to socially transition in a university space. Now, at this time, I didn't medically transition as yet. But I also, and so my documents were not congruent. But at this stage, obviously, all I needed to do was live my life the way I feel comfortable to do so. And so living my life was by expressing myself in terms of how I dress, the hairstyles I did, the makeup I started wearing. All of these things helped me to be included in a society that is heteronormative or cisnormative, space. And so I could navigate my life like that. Obviously, there were still talks because the people that I started studying with knew me as a boy in my first year, you know. But now moving over to second year and feeling more comfortable with myself, with my sexuality, with my gender, and how I saw myself. Yet at this stage, I must say that I did not know what it means to be transgender. There was a lack of education. There was a lack of information at this stage of my life. I then knew I'm going to have to somehow dress like a female to feel like a female, you know? And so that's what I did. And then a few years later, I got information on, but also knowing that I was not attracted to gay men at that time. I was not attracted to people who identify as gay, although this was the only label I knew. And so I knew I was attracted to cisgender men. And so you would have conversations with your friends and they would be.
Oh, there it goes again. Grayson, let me talking about, okay, you're back, there you go.
Sorry about this again. Like I said, that this is really annoying, but it is something I would love to share my story and my involvement in this process. So just to bear with me.
No problem.
And so people would always assume, or people would always accuse you of, you know, converting or stealing the men in society, because aren't you supposed to be like a gay drag queen type of thing? You know, so those were the type of conversations that my friends or people in broader society would have with my friends. And that this information would definitely come back to me. And I needed to explain to them, but at this time, remember that a lack of education, a lack of information from me as a trans woman, I could not empower my friends with the correct knowledge, with the correct terms, with the correct pronouns. I could not empower them to give back to the community, you know, in terms of who I really am. So it was quite a difficult time for me, but I navigated through that. And years later, I got access to a doctor. I got access to speaking to a psychologist. And so I now knew what it meant to be transgender. But then I moved to Johannesburg for a little.
Kanye's network is playing hide and seek with us. I think she can continue her story in a little bit. Grayson, you actually work and you serve at I Am, which is Inclusive and Affirming Ministries. And it is a Christian organization, which in my little knowledge, it affirms who people are, who people believe that they are. So do you find that the church misquotes and mispreaches sexuality or gender a lot of the time? Especially when and I'm saying we because I'm a part of the church and I'm a member of the church, especially when we want to ostracize them, when we want to not accept them fully into the church, or want to decide what they can do and what they can't do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do work for an organization. You know, quite often when you say Inclusive and Affirming Ministries, they think it's a church. And it's not a church. You know, it's an NGO, an LGBTI NGO that focuses primarily on the lived experiences of LGBTI people within faith communities. Above and beyond that, we also work within civil society and in partnership with government departments. Yeah. Excuse me. Yes, indeed. You know, I mean, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I actually decided to join Inclusive and Affirming Ministries, is that in a lot of the advocacy that we do within society, for striving for freedom of expression and freedom of agency, is that we always tiptoe around one of the main problems that bring about homophobia and transphobia within society, and that is the interpretation of the biblical text, right? And when you read, one of the things that we do as I am is contextual Bible study, where we unpack the text in the contextual form, because at the end of the day, it's like, you are who you are. They normally say that they didn't make Adam and Eve. They didn't make Adam and Steve. They made Adam and Eve. But Steve is here. So what must happen to Steve? Should Steve be killed? Should Steve be taken to jail? In as much as, Steve is here. And Steve must be accommodated within society. And how we've been inculcated growing up that, who we are is incorrect and who we are is an abomination, that you find yourself in a situation that you start hating who you are. I remember quite vividly when I was a part of the church growing up, that I even found myself praying the gay away from myself, because I'm told that this is wrong. But at the end of the day, who I am and my thoughts and my emotions and my feelings, can never be cast aside. When I walk into a room, I walk into a room as a Black man. I walk into a room with my skin color, my socioeconomic status, as well as my identity. I'm walking with all those things, and none of that is more important than the other at the end of the day. So this conversation regarding, how, faith communities affirm LGBTI people is very important, because, quite often you find that queer people are found as outcasts. They must be pushed aside because the Bible says it's wrong. But the very same biblical text speaks to eunuchs, and eunuchs were people who guarded queens during the biblical era, and they were all castrated, right? And subsequently was said that as a eunuch, you cannot worship in the house of the Lord. As a eunuch, you cannot be a believer in Christ, right? But in Matthew says that, specifically Jesus' word says that, some are made that way and some are born that way. And those that can accept this should, so there's affirmation of bodies that are different in the Bible. But we need to verbalize more of those scriptures that affirm bodies that exist within society, because it's never going to change. It's always existed, and will continue to exist. Being visible in today's century is not a new phenomenon.
Yeah. Sure, absolutely. Kanye, I see your back. Do you want to maybe continue where you left off? Because you were actually at a point where you said that it was easy for you to transition after second year or second year of varsity, and also people not getting you. You were a boy, and now all of a sudden you're a girl. You're dressed like a girl. So that's where you were.
Okay, so let me continue. So when I found information about what it means to be transgender and how to transition, I actually managed to access black market hormones. And perhaps we can talk a little bit more about that. So buying hormones over the counter, believing that it will work for you, because at the time I didn't have the funds. I moved to Johannesburg, so there wasn't a big support system during that period. And I actually bought black market hormones over the counter. And this was, I felt an increasing need to affirm myself, more and more so medically. So I would buy hormones over the counter and, hoping that something would happen, that I would get some sort of some breasts at this stage, but nothing happened for me. I think the hormones that I was on didn't work, but obviously subsequently I moved back to Cape Town, and then I reached out to my current organization now, to Gender Dynamics, to steer me in the right direction. And so since then I've been medically transitioning. But like I said, it wasn't an easy process, but it wasn't as difficult for me, because what I did was I just took the courage that I had and I started transitioning, socially affirming myself, always surrounding myself with, you know, friends that are supportive of who I am, friends that are supportive of how I identify and how I express that. And so throughout my years as an undergraduate, I met some amazing people. I met some amazing friends that now we are still even friends up until this day. Some of them are no longer in Cape Town, but we are still friends today because of the support that they rendered for me at that stage during coming to terms with who I am, trying to find the words to express that, and then ultimately just living my life, you know.
Let us talk about the black market, because I need us to talk about the black market, not just the hormones, but also surgery, you know, doing backstreet surgeries, because the medical system or the government and the medical system in our country is not working fast enough. It's not working efficiently enough. How big is that? How big is it that you find that transgender community find eventually go to almost like backdoor abortions, but they go backdoor in order for them to transition medically fully?
Stella, hello. I think it is an increasing problem, not just in South Africa. This is an international issue. I think people are so determined to prove to the world that I am who I say I am, and because there are so many questions about who are you, how do you identify, and how can you prove that? You know, I think most trans people, not just trans women, but trans men as well, opt for black market hormones or for black market surgeries simply because it's easily accessible. Also, that those people who's been, you know, performing these black market traits, I think they are able to kind of understand where this person is coming from. But yet at the rear end of that, you find that it's not a safe option. It is definitely not a safe option, although we feel so determined and we feel like we have to prove before we die, because now the waiting list is so long. Like Grayson was explaining earlier on, that our public healthcare system, there's a lack of education, a lack of sensitization when it comes to not just doctors, but also nursing staff. And so, besides money being an option, besides finances being an option, being an issue for us, we understand that we might take forever. We might even die in the process of waiting to be affirmed by our government, you know?
Sure. And what kind of, yes, Grayson, you want to say something? Sorry.
Yes, look, you know, on speaking on access to gender affirming healthcare, with specific reference to hormones at this particular point in time, is that when you do a situational analysis on the African continent, or specifically the Southern African region, you find that homosexuality is criminalized, right? Yeah. And what's very interesting about the criminalization of homosexuality is that they don't criminalize your attraction to another man or another woman, but they criminalize the sexual interaction between people who affirm themselves as gay or lesbian or transgender, etc., etc. So the criminalization thereof subsequently speaks to access to hormone therapy. You cannot get access to gender affirming healthcare if it's a criminal offense within your particular country. So now subsequently, because of this, that's what also speaks to people accessing hormones behind or illegally, for lack of a better word, within your particular country, because it's criminalized. But now you not affirming your gender speaks to the gender dysphoria that one has. So gender dysphoria, it's subjective towards every trans and gender diverse person. It's not the same for everyone, you know. But it speaks to mental wellness. It speaks to distress. It speaks to anxiety. So the need to affirm yourself because of your situation and your status as a country. For example, Zimbabwe, for example, Ghana, for example, Uganda, for example, Namibia. These are all countries where, you know, homosexuality is criminalized, therefore you can't get access to gender-affirming healthcare. Therefore, the increase in accessing it in unscrupulous ways.
Sure. My other question is, yes, carry on. Yes, can you?
Sorry about the interjection. I think that there's the requirements, there's prerequisites for us to affirm ourselves medically, but also when it
maybe when you come back, you can also maybe add to this the healthcare biases that you experience as transgender community. You go to the hospital and you say you affirm as male, and then they say to you, no, we want to put you in a female's ward or in a woman's ward. But that is, you are saying to yourself, I affirm as male and identify as male, and therefore they disagree with who you are and what you're saying, and vice versa with women. How can we deal with that? How can the healthcare system and facilities accommodate the community?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, it's the healthcare system was built, you know, for people within the binary, male and female. That's it. And the lack of sensitized healthcare service providers and sensitized communique and languaging as well within hospitals is very imperative. That is why there's a high rate of LGBTI persons in generally that would think twice about outsourcing healthcare services, because they know exactly the kind of service that they'll get, you know, from that particular nurse or from that gynecologist. Because in as much as I affirm myself as a man, I'll need to see a gynecologist for a pap smear. So could you imagine the shock on the guy's face when I'm like, hey, chap, I'm here for my appointment. You know, because of my beard, he's going to laugh at me, you know, and now I need to educate this chap about who I am, subsequently now coming out of the closet time and time and again. So, and that is directly linked to sexual reproductive healthcare services and sexual reproductive rights, health rights, because currently in how the healthcare system has not packaged it for LGBTI people and the kind of sex that LGBTI people engage in. So there needs to be a shift in the services provided from a governmental point of view in order to make the significant shift. And of course, continuous training and sensitization for healthcare providers, because in as much as the world is transforming, our minds and our thinking needs to transform as well.
Yeah, but do you think we have, I mean, can you imagine the patient having to teach the doctor? You know, that would also be confusing, you know, a confusing situation to be in. Do you think we have enough medical specialists to deal with specifically transgender?
No, quite simply put, no, I don't think so. That is why we've got a 25-year-long waiting list, you know, because those that specialize, for lack of a better word in this particular regard, within gender-affirming healthcare or surgeries or whatever it may be, it's a limited amount of people. And based on people's biblical and cultural convictions, some opt not to, you know. If I'd remind you about when government gave Home Affairs officials the option not to solemnize marriages, subsequently that was taken away, saying that it's someone's human right, so you cannot take it away. But unfortunately, the same has not happened within the medical fraternity, where, you know, any conviction that does not do with your job description, you know, has to be put aside. So there's not enough. What in an ideal world, you know, gender affirming healthcare should get taught, you know, from you studying medicine in your varsity days. You know, that is where the knowledge needs to grow from varsity, so that when you are qualified medical doctor or qualified whoever, you can then subsequently provide the service in a sensitized manner wherever you go.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Can I please bring you in? One of the questions and a while back, I asked this question to you, Grayson, when we were having a private conversation. The question is, do you find yourself having to come out all the time to people? Maybe you meet a new person, a guy or a lady that you're attracted to. Do you find yourself having to explain to this person over and over again that, look, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going through, and this is how far I am in the process? And how exhausting is that? Because I would be exhausted.
Thank you for the question. I think that my internet just keeps on messing up. But yes, I don't necessarily have to deal with coming out consistently. But I know many of my friends that needs to come out consistently. Now, one thing I think I did for myself was to affirm myself, not only medically, but also with the Department of Home Affairs legally. And so that kind of like takes out the questioning of it all when you have to, you know, access services. And so because my documents are now congruent, and here you can see that if your documents are congruent, you are asked less questions. This does not mean that you are not being asked questions about who you are, how you identify, and why you express yourself in that way. So I'm having to deal with less questions, but this doesn't mean that I don't have to deal with questions about my gender identity and expression thereof. It's very tiring. I mean, you constantly have to explain to people. You constantly have to even, it's like having interviews on a daily basis, I would assume for most of the community members, because people are interviewing you about you. You're having to, you know, stand your ground and say, this is who I am, this is how I live my life. And so you need to accept it or you don't, you know, but you got to make a choice here. And so I want to go back to your question, your previous question, where you spoke about, you know, being hospitalized and being a transgender person. This question is not just applicable to hospitals and being hospitalized. These questions are also applicable to shelters. The same question is applicable to prisons, where trans and gender diverse people are incarcerated. For example, we'll use Jade September, is a transgender woman as an example, who was incarcerated, and upon her being incarcerated, she identified as male, and she was legally still male upon her incarceration. But we then found that as years went by, she became more comfortable with who she was, and she then wanted to transition inside the prison system. But obviously, this has come with a lot of backlash from the department, where she could not affirm herself or express herself by wearing female underwear, by doing makeup, by you know, having certain haircuts. In fact, they were very stringent on the fact that she needs to cut her hair. She was put in isolation, and her hair shaven all off to show that she is a man. Even up until today, we are still experiencing the same issue with the Department of Corrections and the specific facility where she's in. I mean, she then took the department to task, and the court has ruled that Jade September should be addressed by her preferred pronouns, by her chosen name. She should be allowed to express herself the way that she feels most comfortable. But even if I go today to Malmesbury prison, you can find that they still refer to Jade as a he. They still refer to Jade as, you know, not using Jade September, the name that she chose for herself, by her legal name. And so in some cases inside, she's explained to me that even after the judgment, it's now seemingly more evident where she is being victimized for the fact that she's brought the spotlight on the department. And so I think that this is not just an issue when it comes to hospitals. Yes, I don't think that anyone has the strength to fight with doctors or medical staff when you are, you know, when you are taken up in a hospital to say, listen, but my document says this, or this is how I identify, or this is who I am, even though my documents are not congruent with who I am. I think that is something that will then have to be discussed at the later stage. But at that specific moment, you are not being respected. Your rights are not being protected and promoted by state actors. And we find in a lot of cases that state actors violate human rights on a daily basis, especially when it comes to, this is especially true for transgender persons in South Africa. Like I said, that we find that correctional services wardens, we find that nurses and doctors, we find that law officials, law enforcement officials, South African police services, we find that these state actors impedes on human rights, on our human rights on the daily. It's just that we don't always discuss this. But state actors can also be, and in most cases they are causing secondary trauma to the person, or to the trans and gender diverse person.
Yeah, because that would definitely affect you psychologically and emotionally as a person. Sure. Kim, I think I'm going to give to you. So if there are any questions from our friends on the Facebook page, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sly. I'm going to start with these 3 questions that I have here, which is the first one. During that period or the process of transitioning, like, how did it feel, you know, when someone will call you or refer like to you in a gender that you are transitioning from? For instance, if like a male, you know, transitioning to a female, then in that process, you know, someone refers to you CC or whatsoever. I hope you get the question, because I do have a friend who was a female but now is in the process of transitioning to a male, and whenever like we are walking, you know, and someone will come and say Siswam, you know, and all that, like he will be angry and all that. So I'd love to know from your experience, like, how did that feel when someone will refer or call you in a gender that you are transitioning from? And secondly, I think this one will be directed to Kanye. She mentioned ifamily yakhe was a family that is religious, and therefore I would love to know ukuthi according to kuye ingaba mhlawumbe i-religion had influence on how family responded or reacted kule ndaba ye-sexuality yakhe. And then the last one, with the issue of waiting period that is about 25 years, isn't there a way, maybe mhlawumbe, according to you guys, anything ukuthi it could work, you know, just to make the process or things, you know, less easy and accessible in a short period of time? Because as you have mentioned that, like, 25 years, it's a lot, you know, there are people who die in the process, basically waiting list. So isn't there any other way or something that can be done to make the process much less and accessible to everyone? Zizo Ezotlai.
I think they both heard the questions. Grayson, do you want to maybe answer some of those?
Sure. Look, like I alluded earlier on that, you know, in an ideal world, you know, from you know, studying to be a doctor, being taught about gender identity, and being taught about, you know, human sexuality is imperative. But right now, you know, in South Africa, we find that a lot of the responses that we get from government regarding what we want as a society has normally a hierarchy, you know. So there's a hierarchy of demands and needs that get met from a government perspective. So if government really wanted to make sure that doctors who are registered, because there's various associations where you have to renew your licenses, so there's a record of who is a service provider. So if there was continuous training for service providers and medical doctors, and a law specifically that enforces you to meet the needs of whichever clientele that walks through the door would be ideal. But unfortunately, we've reached a stage right now where it's not on government's list. It's not on government's list. We do have Act 49 of 2003, which is the alteration of sex descriptor and identity and gender marker. It's been in existence since 2003. But however, even today, implementation within Home Affairs is still a problem. So government basically has the power to do quite a number of things. As civil society, there's only this much we can do. We can knock on as many doors, but if that door won't willingly open, then our advocacy will begin and end right there. So in an ideal world, if government had to intervene right now and enforce this particular knowledge, then it would be ideal. I think it's very important that when you work with society, that you have social skills. And social skills not only just in terms of interacting with people, but understanding people's identities and having to deal with that. I think that's where we fall short quite a number of times. I think I'll pass to Kanye right now.
Kanye, I think another question was, Kim, please assist. It was about them belonging to church. What was the question about the church? Because I remember the other one, your third one was that how does she feel, maybe addressing Kanye now, how does she feel when people refer to her as a he? People who knew her before she transitioned, who still refer to her as a he now.
So with regards to that, I would like Kim D to just perhaps, rephrase the questions in English for me, or translate the questions in English for me. And this is one thing I can kind of give advice on. Let's not assume, someone speaks a certain language, just like we don't want to assume people's pronouns, So when it comes to someone, and believe it or not, I've been transitioning for many years now. And some of my family members are still referring to me as he. In fact, my grandma, she's almost 80 years old, so it's a struggle, right? And also because I don't necessarily see her on a regular basis, we find that because you are not present in family meetings, you are not always there, people just run with what you were born with. And so even up until now, you find that my family is still using, the pronoun that I don't identify with, or the pronoun that I don't affirm myself. It really is frustrating because at the end of the day, I remember not being part of gender.
I think we lost her. But if I can just add on.
But I think you spoke about the alteration of a sexual marker, and I wanted to ask about that. How long does it take? Because my understanding, well, please explain to us what it is and what it means. In my understanding, it is when Home Affairs changes your title from Mr. to Ms., or they change your gender from male to female. Am I correct?
Well, yes, sort of. So the Alteration of Sex Descriptor Act, basically allows you to, because your ID number, depending on sex assigned at birth, your ID number, there's a digit that determines whether you're a female assigned at birth or male assigned at birth. So subsequently, in affirming your identity, that will then subsequently change to affirm you as male. And then secondly, what the Act also does is that because you are born and given a name based on sex assigned at birth, quite often as trans people, the names that we're given do not speak to our identity. So that particular act then allows you to change your name as well to suit your affirmation of who you are. So that particular act, that's what it does, those two main things. Unfortunately, it can take a month, it can take 5 years. There is no set policy on a turnaround period, on a particular timeline. So then this becomes a problem in you living your life. Because as you're affirming yourself medically and your body's changing and your face is changing, your documentation is not coming as fast as your journey is progressing. So that's why you find that, when you get stopped by the traffic officer, you asked earlier on, how many times you get discriminated against, and you explain to the police officer or the traffic officer that, listen, the reason why my driver's license looks like this, and the reason why there's that incongruency between me right now is because of 1, 2, and 3. And this, of course, also speaks to, when you're at the airport, and, you look a particular way, but, your ID affirms yourself in a particular way. So then that becomes a problem. And this also speaks to the huge unemployment rate amongst trans and gender diverse persons, is that because these documents are not coming fast enough, you are more prone to getting discriminated against the system in that particular way. So you'll find that the ID that hasn't been changed yet and still awaiting says Tapelo, but the person that enters the interview room is Tandi. And then there's that irretrievable reconciliation between what the ID says and the person's expression, which then jeopardizes your chance of getting that particular job. So if Home Affairs was hurrying up with these particular systems, subsequently that would then not happen. So it's not moving fast enough.
Sure. Yeah, no. Because then it means you are living as one person, but your documentation are saying you are somebody else.
Absolutely.
And I think I think that is the essence of this conversation, to show people how difficult it is to transition and how difficult it is to be a transgender person. There was also conversations about misgender. What is misgender? You spoke about gender dysphoria, but what is misgender? Is it when you are in between genders, for a lack of a better phrase?
So misgender is exactly what one of Kim D's questions were, in terms of you affirming yourself as one thing, but the world keeps telling you that you're someone else. That is misgendering. So if you affirm yourself as a he, but people around you insist on calling you a she, that is misgendering. And the same will apply being dead named, where they utilize the name that you do not affirm yourself in the very same breath. That happens with being misgendered.
There's a question from Vuyolwe to Ngofe. I hope I'm saying your name right. And she says, good day. How does one get involved in the work that inclusive and affirming ministries do? So how does one get in touch with I Am?
We have a website, Inclusive and Affirming Ministries. We are based in Cape Town. The minute you type in Inclusive and Affirming Ministries on Google, we will pop up. We're based in Cape Town, Durban. So you can just reach us on the telephone line provided, as well as the email address provided on the website as well.
Thank you. I think she heard. Maybe as we draw to a close, can you spoke, or rather on your biography, you said something about assisting people who are disowned by their families. I know quite a few of people who have been disowned by their families because of who they identify as now. How does gender dynamics assist those people? Because now there's probably a child somewhere who's coming out to their parents, and their parents are saying, I will not have such a thing in my house. Where I gave birth to a boy, and then the boy saying, no, actually, Mama, I'm a girl, or give birth to a girl, and then saying, I'm a boy. So how does gender dynamics assist those people?
So, Selahelo, we at Gender Dynamics, we provide support services through our referral program. So we refer people through this referral database that we have, because Gender Dynamics is not a direct service provider. We find that community members are in need of direct service provision. And this relates to anything from psychosocial support, medical support, wanting to start their hormone replacement therapy journey, wanting to speak to a psychologist to understand what is happening with themselves. Parents reaching out to Gender Dynamics asking, how do I now deal with a child who just came out to me to say, listen, I'm not a girl. I know that you see me as a girl. You've bought me, dresses, but I want to be dressed like a boy. How do I deal with those things? And so we are then referring those people who send those emails to us on through our info line. We refer them to service providers in our network, and perhaps sometimes even to partner organizations, because remember that Gender Dynamics doesn't really work with transgender persons who are minors, but we do have partners that we refer to that is best suited to answer those type of questions and refer from their end.
Yeah. So maybe as my final question, what would you say to a parent whose child is transgender? The parent has no clue what it means to be transgender. What would you guys say to that parent as people who are actually going through that journey?
Yeah, I think, parents and family with particular, in general, LGBTI children and in particular trans children, is that growing up, you already see the difference in gender expression when the person or the child grows up. So my one advice would certainly be that when the child confirms your suspicions, don't pretend like you didn't see it growing up as your child was growing up, because it's not a new phenomena that they're coming out the closet, which I don't really like using the word coming out the closet. But, those suspicions that you've always had as a brother, as a mother, as a father, when they confirm those suspicions, don't shy them away or isolate them, because between you and affirming the person's identity might possibly be between you and the person ending their life, because they feel like they cannot go on anymore. And there's a huge suicide rate within the LGBTI community because of people not being accepted. So you are that person that will be a defining moment for whether the person continues their life or not. So we need to affirm people's identities. As the minute those little boxes that, the 6 billion boxes get broken, and you can affirm who you are, the world becomes a really pretty powerful and interesting world. So that would be my.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. Because I know sometimes the problem is with the parents or the families, because now the parents would say, what would people say? What would Ruthie in church say? What would my community say? So yeah, what would you say to a parent whose child is transgender now?
Well, what I could tell any parent at this stage would be to try and understand, to reach out for help if you don't understand and you find it difficult to understand who this child is or how this child identifies. There are support networks, there are support systems available, there are support groups that you can reach out to, whether you want to be in a support group with your kid or without your kid, it's okay. But in order for you to understand what your child is going through, putting yourself in that child's shoes, because remember, like Grayson said, it's between you affirming your child or perhaps your child ending your child's life. I think that even constitutionally, children are protected to a huge extent when it comes to the equality framework. And so a parent or a child's, family, their beliefs and their freedom of religion and opinions cannot exercise or cannot be exercised in a way that is actually violating the child's rights to equality and dignity. And so I would, in this case, say that search for the correct channels of support, search for, for information. Yes, there is information available, like we said, online, but then you can also find organizations like I Am Ministries, like Gender Dynamics, like Iranti out in Johannesburg, so that we can guide you on how to assist your child going forward.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for availing your time to have this conversation. I am so glad that, you know, sometimes when we have conversations around the LGBTIQA plus community, it uses so many jargons, it uses so many words that you don't understand. And I am so glad that you guys brought it down to some of our levels and explained to us in simple terms what it means to be transgender. You explained to us in simple terms how it feels to be transgender, and Godspeed to you guys. Seriously, I'm going to give you guys a minute each just to give us your parting shots, your closing remarks. Kanye?
Well, thank you so much for having me on in this discussion. I think these platforms are most definitely helpful to create visibilization of trans bodies in South Africa. Currently, we see a surge in LGBTQ hate crimes in the country. And so these platforms for people to understand what it means, having someone, a friend, a family member, a child who might identify as other than the binary that we are used to, you know, I'm glad for this platform because as much as it is Pride Month, and usually Pride Month is linked to celebrations and parties and happiness, I think this time around and this year around, we are in mourning, we are sad, we are losing brothers and sisters and siblings left, right, and center. And so I'm grateful for this platform for me to speak to a wider audience, maybe not just in Cape Town, but you know, all over South Africa who's tuned into the Facebook Live, to understand that this year we are not celebrating anything. We are just in mourning this year, you know, and so we want to create visibilization. We want to create, you know, education around inclusion, because when will this end? When will we understand each other, and when will we actually live out our policies and our constitution that claims to be inclusive? And you know, Section 9 of the Constitution speaks to that part of this conversation, where we say that we are not supposed to be discriminated against based on who we are, based on our sexuality and gender identity. But yet we find that we are being killed for based on that very thing, and we don't even have policies and laws that speaks to hate crimes, you know, that is out there in paper to protect us. And so we are calling on government institutions, we are calling on state actors to stand with us and you know, help us find a way to protect our community. Because yes, in essence, it is written on paper, but in most cases we find that in practice, this is not, you know, the rights that we enjoy.
Yeah, sure. You are so right. I mean, when it comes to hate crimes, my mind just gets boggled. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I've got a motto that I live by, and it says, live and let live. You know, I want to live my life, and I choose to live my life the way I want to and the way I believe that I should live it. And I should give everybody the right to do exactly that for themselves and by themselves. But we continue to commemorate these rights that have been made. We continue to celebrate, even though we're not going to go to the street as we always do during Pride. You know, now we are celebrating in different manners. Even this is a celebration to say, we are celebrating you guys, we see you. I remember saying to Grayson another time that he is the only trans person that I know that I had, you know, in my life. And we are celebrating the fact that I know somebody. You know, 5 years ago, I didn't know anybody. Now I know at least almost a handful of people who are transgendering. And we are celebrating that. We're celebrating the fact that we are using a church platform to talk about transgender. and it's okay, you know. So we really are making strides, and my heart goes to everybody, you know, to the whole community, and my heart goes to people who are transgendering and, you know, going through a very long and daunting journey. And maybe part of my, I'm gonna give to you now, Gracie, but part of something that I'm thinking about when you were closing, Kanye, is the fact that maybe there needs to be funding, you know, because not every transgender person is going to have money in order to be medically affirmed. So maybe there needs to be a GoFundMe or something where people can just donate money, so that when someone says, I am a man, but I was born in a female body, there are funds for them to be able to do that, but also funds to create units in hospitals, to create doctors, to empower doctors and medical people who are able to perform those surgeries. Because even if we have money, but we have people who cannot perform those surgeries, then, you know, we're going back to square one. So that's really my prayer. Grayson, your party shot.
Thank you so much. You know, I think that, you know, the more we have these kinds of conversations, the more we constantly learn and unlearn. I think what we need to do is, you know, seize the moment as parents and uncles and aunts. We should not take for granted the learning curves and moments of learning that you can instill in your children at home from a very young age, and teach them differently. Teach them, you know, love, kindness, and practicing love and kindness. You know, quite often people say that, you know, no one is born racist. You know, that knowledge gets inculcated, that hate gets inculcated, you know, as you grow up. And the same with homophobia and transphobia. So let us use the opportunity to teach our children differently. You know, as we constantly move as the world, our thinking also needs to change. You know, the more we have such, because some people find this conversation uncomfortable or a difficult conversation to have. But the more we have difficult conversations, the more we learn, and the more we speak to diversity, and people can verbalize their own lived experiences and see how we can path a way forward. I think as a society, we should not strive for equality, but strive for equity. Equity meaning bridging the gap, addressing reparations of the past. You know, a direct example between the difference between equality and equity is having a male and female bathroom, but equity is having a male, female, and gender inclusive bathroom. And that's how we need to live our lives. So we are moving, you know, we are moving. Quite excited to have my aunt on the call today, who's way mature over, you know, in her years. So the more our elderly people are also understanding and making themselves available to learn, we are definitely doing something right in society. So we need to keep on keeping on. Thank you so much, Life, for the opportunity.
I am so proud of your aunt. Can I just tell people that your aunt is all of 73 years old, and she is on the Zoom call, and your uncle is 80 years old and is on the Zoom call. You know, when you have such parents who are opening themselves up to learning and supporting and accepting, you know, I always say to people, big difference is not, you know, sometimes things should not only be good and bad. You know, different is also great. And it's okay for us to embrace difference. And also talking about, you know, homophobia and transphobia. Different is great, guys. And we should normalize having these conversations until they are not uncomfortable. We should normalize having these conversations over coffee, over family dinners, at a braai. It should be okay to have these conversations, so long as we are not having them in a demeaning and a derogatory manner. I am all for it. Absolutely. So thank you to everybody who had connected to us on Zoom. You guys are super, super amazing. Thank you, Grayson Teller. Thank you, Kanye Phillips. You guys are super amazing. And I'm going to use you guys. Believe me, I'm going to be inviting you to other spaces that I occupy, because we really need activists. We need people who are pro-life, because this is life. You are living your life the way you believe that you deserve to live it. And you believe that this is who you are. And no one else should be able to tell you otherwise. When I walk into a church, they ask me who I am and what I am. And I say, my name is Selena Arente and I'm a Black woman. And they say, okay, tick. And I get a space and I do whatever I want. in church. So you should be able to do the same. They should be able to ask you, who are you? And you say, I am Khanyisile Phillips, and I'm a woman. I'm a Black woman, or I'm a brown woman. As my husband says, he's brown. And they should just say, take a seat and worship God. You know, similarly with you, Grayson, I think the church has a long way to go. But I also need to acknowledge that we have made strides as the church. You know, we've come a long way. For us to be able to talk about these topics on these platforms, it's amazing for the church. These are topics that were hidden and never spoken about. But the next thing I want to hear Kanye saying, I'm back at church and I am serving in church and I am in a leadership position, instead of people leaving the church because of the abuse by us as the church. So friends on Facebook, thank you so much for connecting with us. Thank you for being a part of this conversation once again. I love these unpopular conversations because then they get to open us up. Tonight, before we speak, we're going to be on WhatsApps with different people asking each other questions, people asking for website addresses, numbers, and that is exactly what this platform seeks to do. And Kanye, you're not lying. This platform reaches over 2.5 million people a month, and not just in South Africa, but all over the world. Tomorrow, we are going to be having a conversation with the media chief of protocol in Uganda. So that is how far this platform reaches. So I am so proud of you guys. I love you. And the day I make my billions, I am donating you guys for transgender people to be able to do what they believe they need to do. And that's it. The rest is out of our control.
I will remind you, Sly. I will remind you.
I am coming too. I will not let that go. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
I am so glad that you accepted the invite, and we've learned a lot from you guys. Friends, let us close our eyes and thank God in prayer once again. We come before you, thanking you for the gift of knowledge, thanking you for the gift of information, thanking you for the gift of families who love us regardless of who we are, and who love us regardless of who the world thinks that we are, but they love us because that is what family does. Lord, I pray for the church to continue having these conversations, and for the church to always open its doors and its heart for all of your children, because all of us are made in your image. None of us were there with you when you decided which image it was supposed to be for which person. That remains you, God, being God. Heavenly Father, as we go to bed, we thank you, asking you to protect us over this cold night, and because we are hoping and we are trusting in you that we are going to be able to wake up tomorrow and carry on with the things of the day that we do every day. Lord, bless this church, the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. Bless this platform, Wesley Guild SA Facebook page, and bless all of the other platforms that partner with us as we engage in these topics. We ask all of these in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Friends, good night and God bless you.
Good night. Take care. Cheerio.
Great. I just stopped streaming. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. This was not too bad.